Welcome to Functional Philosophy. I'm Charles Tew. That's T as in tango, E as in echo, and W as in whiskey. This is episode number 11, and its title is The Meaning of Social Justice. Racists for Egalitarianism. The social justice movement has influenced more people, and to a greater degree than any other ideological movement of the past 10 years. The left has become emboldened, the center has become more accommodating of the left, and the so-called right has developed its own social justice movement called the alt-right. Don't interpret that last part as in any way supporting the offensively stupid horseshoe theory of politics. The point is that social justice is everywhere. And while there are some pockets of what can be called, at best, impotent rebels, the warriors of the social justice empire continue to cut them down. Every major form of media has been obviously infected with social justice ideology. There's on-the-nose garbage like Ghostbusters, but there's also subtler garbage like Star Wars. Most people didn't seem to have a problem with the fact that the young protagonists in The Force Awakens were either non-white or female. That's understandable because the actors, other than Daisy Ridley, were fine. The problem was that you knew they were chosen for reasons other than their acting ability. They needed to be good actors, but if they had had that deadly combination of whiteness and maleness, oh no. You're out of here. Or perhaps would you like to play one of our villains? You can be one of the First Order, our comically Nazi villains who are conspicuously white and male. The media didn't get this way because they wanted to make money. That fallacy will be the subject of another episode. They got this way because almost all intellectuals and creative people are leftists. This is not due to an alleged affinity between temperament and political stance. That idea is something Jordan Peterson has been parading around, and he's disastrously wrong about it, as well as everything else. There is no inherent link between creativity and leftism. In fact, accepting the premises that lead to statism make creativity more difficult, as evidenced by our modern aesthetic vacuum. The truth is that people are motivated by ideas, and the so-called right chose to abandon ideas long ago, and has chosen instead to fight on pragmatic grounds. Social justice is winning the game because it's the only player. They are the establishment. They control the schools and universities, the news, everything. And they salivate at the thought of getting people fired or blacklisted when people don't without question prostrate themselves before anything non-straight, non-white, non-male. I won't call it McCarthyism because Joe McCarthy was a hero who identified real communist agents of a foreign power with which we were intermittently at proxy war, which is real war. These people had committed treason and put American lives and the future of the freedom of mankind at risk. For being brave enough to do something to stop that when few would, he had his name dragged through the mud by vicious, dishonest, evil nihilists, and still has today. And, disgracefully, the so-called right has let the left succeed in this for so long that most people take leftist propaganda as neutral history. Right-wingers love to accuse the left of McCarthyism, as if the left even pretends to care about freedom of speech anymore. You are losing if the best you can do is play on your opponent's terms and try to catch him being hypocritical. Anyway, the least I can do to honor that man's legacy is to mention his heroism here. You can know that someone is a dishonest imbecile and hack if he ever uses the term McCarthyism. The distortion of historical American anti-communism is relevant to what's happening today. Imagine that 50 years from now, the left has continued to be as successful as it's been for the past 150 years. You can bet that in that future, people will be taught and will believe that the early 2000s were a dark time for advocates of social justice, and they could barely express their ideas without being shunned, ostracized, and punished. Now that is obviously the exact opposite of what's going on today. But if they dominate the culture, they spin a tale that makes them the victims, rather than the vicious, frothing victimizers they are. Now understand that we are living in that future from the perspective of the 1950s. The communists pretended to be victims, but they had massive cultural power, with which they persecuted capitalists while fearing little themselves. Exactly as adherents of social justice philosophy dox people and get them fired today while pretending to be victims. Ayn Rand worked in Hollywood, and she said that she didn't know of any communist who'd been blacklisted, but did know of pro-capitalists, or at least anti-communists, who had been blacklisted and couldn't find work and were shut out from pursuing careers in Hollywood. Many of the communist agents who were questioned at the 1947 House Un-American Activities Committee found work again, because they had friends in Hollywood, just as social justice advocates face no real punishment today, because they have friends in power everywhere. They are the establishment. Yet they committed double injustice by withholding the status of oppressed freedom fighter from the people who actually are the oppressed freedom fighters. Social justice advocates receive massive support and face little risk, but get the credit for being brave, while the real freedom fighters suffer bravely for their beliefs and get no credit for it, and are alleged to be the untouchable establishment, which the social justice advocates actually are. The friendly witnesses in the 1947 UAC hearings, the people who testified about communist infiltration into Hollywood, they were punished. They were the victims of a real blacklist. The famous stars couldn't be touched, but many of the lesser-known people, character actors and writers, were shut out of Hollywood thereafter. Back then, it was like it is today. Don't let them fool you. Now, because believers in social justice are such a malignant force, and so effective at disarming people by taking advantage of their lack of ideological confidence, it's important to understand their ideology, so that you can know what's wrong with it and fight it in the name of the truth. Aristotle said that, quote, "It is absurd to hold that a man ought to be ashamed of being unable to defend himself with his limbs, but not of being unable to defend himself with speech and reason, when the use of reason is more distinctive of a human being than the use of his limbs." Unquote. Intellectual self-defense is a vastly more common, and therefore more practical, need than physical self-defense is. Although, knowing physical self-defense is great too. So, I'm going to explain the philosophical premises of social justice, why its adherents believe what they believe, and what the implications of their beliefs are. Let's start with the term social justice itself. What does it mean? Social justice can be translated as collectivist egalitarianism. They're not concerned with individual justice, but with justice between collectives, social justice. They don't care about justice for Tom. They care about justice for blacks. But they actually aren't concerned with justice in the rational sense of the word, in the sense of getting what one deserves through a system of equality before the law. They're concerned with egalitarianism as metaphysical equality, as intrinsic equality, equality despite reality, despite the actions and character and innate value of individuals, or of groups as they conceive it. Proper equality means that people of differing superficial characteristics are treated the same way for taking the same actions. The social justice version of equality means that people of differing superficial characteristics may be treated differently for taking the same actions, so as to artificially maintain equality between groups defined on the basis of their members' possession of superficial characteristics. Making sure that black people are treated the same as white people is an end in itself, overriding the concern that good people are treated well and bad people are treated poorly. To a rational person, justice means giving someone what he deserves. To a social justice advocate, it means giving everyone the same thing. Their concept of justice is inherently comparative. Individual justice is incoherent to them. Dealing with an individual has nothing to do with justice. Justice consists of equal treatment, which requires multiple people, equality being an inherently relational concept. There's no such thing as equal when only one instance is involved, and so there is no such thing as individual justice for the advocates of social justice. Desert and equality are often at odds, so everyone must make a choice between these two principles of action. Do you care about treating individual women justly, even if that means fewer women in STEM fields, or do you care about making sure that the sexes are equal, even if that means treating individual women unjustly by giving them special preference? As an aside, I want to point out here that I am as against so-called equality of opportunity as I am against equality of outcome. But that's for another episode. I have to point these things out because my views are unconventional, and if I don't, I will be taken to support one side of a false dichotomy whenever I attack the other. So, anyway, why do advocates of social justice care so much about collectives, especially ones based on superficial biological characteristics, and so little about individuals and objective merit? The source of this evil is Immanuel Kant. Kant initiated what he called his Copernican Revolution. The original Copernican Revolution was the change in perspective from the idea that the sun revolves around the earth to the heliocentric conception of the cosmos. Kant inverted another classical relationship, that between the external world and awareness. He put forward the idea that the external world revolves around our awareness of it, rather than our awareness revolving around the external world. His idea was that the nature of our mind is such that it imposes on us certain forms of understanding the world. The classical idea, held by many philosophers, was that your senses distort reality. So you have to think your way to the truth with pure logic divorced from perception. Kant went further. It's not just your senses that deceive you, but even the ways you're capable of thinking about the world deceive you. Logic is no freer from subjectivity than perception is. You're locked in. Experience and thought are both ways of processing reality for human recognition, and thus you are cut off from the world as it is in itself, which he called the noumenal world, and have access only to the world as we perceive it and think about it, which he called the phenomenal world. So the import of Kant's philosophy is that it became common to believe that every human being shares a collective delusion based on the nature of the human mind, which processes and thus distorts reality, so that it can be grasped by human beings. That's as far as Kant went, but it's only a hop, skip, and a jump from his position to two of its logical implications, which later philosophers developed. First, philosophers dispensed with the noumenal world altogether, on the grounds that it's useless and arbitrary to think about or even posit the existence of something to which one can never have access. That gets rid of objective reality. The second thing philosophers did was balkanize the phenomenal world. If the nature of human beings cuts them off from the real world, then perhaps the nature of every subtype of human being produces its own unique distortions. Perhaps every race, sex, and economic class creates its own reality, unbridgeable by reason, which is itself an artificial product of our minds. That gets rid of rational communication. Social justice is a straightforward product of these two philosophical premises. Social justice adherents accept these ideas and conclude that if there is no objective reality, only disparate collective delusions, then any claim of objectivity and merit on the basis of comparison to an external reality is a lie, perpetrated by the ruling collective in order to maintain power by holding less powerful collectives to the subjective standard of the dominant group. When you say that affirmative action is irrational because we need the best people for the job, and bonus points shouldn't be given on the basis of race, they say that best people for the job is a subjective description, and your standards are simply subjective products of the straight, white, capitalist patriarchy. To them, objectivity is a myth promulgated to defend the dominance of straight, white men. To them, external world is an insidious concept that rationalizes the destruction of certain groups and viewpoints through the claim that those groups and viewpoints don't correspond to reality as it really is, which, according to Kant, we can never know. This is why so many of them are Marxists. Marx believed that ideas are rationalizations caused by the tools of production one happens to be involved with. He believed that people are motivated by material self-interest, and that ideas are just excuses, superstructures that rationalize crude material appropriation at any cost. Social justice adherents simply believe that ideas rationalize social standing and nihilistic urges in addition to material accumulation. This Marxist strain is also why the left doesn't regard Islam as a threat or a cause of evil. Ideas don't cause anything. Material conditions do. It's poverty and Western foreign policy that are motivating Muslims, not their religion, the same way that power is motivating whites, not any alleged allegiance to a mythical objective reality. The social justice conception of reality is bubbles floating in a void. It's irrational to try to justify your bubble by reference to the external world. There's nothing out there. The basis for all judgment is the subjective collective reality, the bubble in which one finds oneself. There is no reality-based logic. There is only black logic and white logic, bourgeois logic and proletarian logic, male logic and female logic, Aryan logic and Jewish logic. The only sin in such a system is to pretend that one's standards transcend collective subjectivity. This is why they place such value on experiences and accuse people of invalidating the experiences of others, such as people paranoid about misogyny. There is no external world, only experiences produced by the mind. So you can't say that there was objectively no misogyny. Objectivity itself is a misogynistic construct. If someone feels that she experienced misogyny, then she did. There's nothing deeper to check that feeling against. This subjectivity is the cause of their seemingly bizarre inversion of the meaning of racism. Racism no longer involves judging people by superficial characteristics. It involves treating those characteristics as unimportant. They actually don't care if you go around saying that black people love fried chicken. They'll take any excuse to get angry, of course, and would get angry if you said that, but fundamentally it doesn't bother them. What they really hate is the idea that fried chicken is unhealthy, or in some way objectively inferior to the preferences of other groups. You can observe that they don't hate being called fat. They hate the idea that being fat is unhealthy. Adherents of social justice are actually worse than Hitler. The cliché applies in a profound way. They are Nazis, but with the last vestige of virtue the Nazis had, a twisted, collective, racist form of self-reverence ripped out. Imagine how evil you have to be to hate Nazis for their virtues. The Nazis were too good for them, too moral, too upstanding. The Nazis believed in hierarchy, and that's what the advocates of social justice hate. They don't hate that Hitler was racist. They don't hate that he killed millions of Jews and many more people in an aggressive war to spread totalitarianism. They're fine with all of that, and in fact, they want all of that. What they hate is that he had the audacity to claim that the Aryan race was superior, and that there was a hierarchy of races. Being Aryan is determinative of moral character and other characteristics? Fine. But that being Aryan is better? Oh no. That's their problem with Nazis. Adherents of social justice are egalitarians. They hate hierarchy as such. Hitler wasn't destructive enough for them. He didn't fully apply nihilism to his own group, and the adherents of social justice want to destroy everyone, including themselves. Their hatred of reality itself is manifest most obviously in their advocacy of whimsical gender labels. By asking you to call them whatever they feel like being called, trans people are asking you to sacrifice your connection to reality so that your identification of reality won't conflict with their delusions. It is an attempt to destroy objectivity, by which I mean a rational, proper connection between your mind and reality. They're starting in the way that will seem most plausible and garner the least resistance, which is demanding only that people respect labels that apply to them. They're not telling you to call a cat a tree. They just want you to call them what they want to be called. This is just like how censorship always sets a precedent by censoring the things no one likes, and then goes on to apply the logic to things people do like. It is a slippery slope. It's logic. If you set the precedent, if you set the principle, the rest is going to come. Cats will eventually be trees to them, and it will be problematic to claim otherwise. It's just like Social Security or the income tax. No one today remembers the arguments that were made at the time. Social Security was supposed to be a small thing, and no, of course it won't get out of control. As time goes on, though, no one remembers the disingenuous special pleading for how their legislation is unprincipled and doesn't imply anything greater. People absorb principles, no matter what they say explicitly. This is how we got LBJ's so-called Great Society, and Nixon's EPA and price and wage controls, and Bush's massive banking regulations, and Obamacare, and all the rest. This is why logic is hated. Because people want to be able to get you to do bad things without your recognizing the unavoidable logical consequences. So they attack logic and principle so that they can lead you off the cliff blind. Throw off those blinders. Think in principle. Don't be intimidated when people try to shut you up by talking about slippery slopes. Logical implication is not a fallacy. This desire to violate cause and effect is the secret desire in the hearts of social justice advocates, secret even to themselves. It's why they choose the worst people to defend, like Michael Brown. Hands up, don't shoot. They chose him because they knew he was guilty. The whole point is to get around justice as a manifestation of reality, which it is. They hate existence and its corollary, the law of identity, and its corollary, cause and effect. They seek injustice as a means of fighting existence itself. If they sunder cause and effect, they destroy identity. And if they destroy identity, they destroy existence. This is their deepest motivation, and it's actually the motivation for most criminal behavior. The goal of social justice is to suspend justice for non-whites, non-males, non-straights. They also have a nihilistic desire to destroy good people who represent reality by acting in accordance with it. This is why they hate anyone successful. White people, rich people, men, they are all proxies for reality, which is their real enemy. This all goes back to their not wanting to conform to reality. So they choose the people who don't and defend them for that reason, but dress it up in terms of anti-racism to fool everyone, most of all themselves. I won't be fooled. I reserve the right to maintain a clear, objective, principled, individual understanding of reality, and I will not give it up for anything, least of all for the whims of frauds and freaks, by which I mean trans people. What I refuse to give up is the right, quote, to sing, to laugh, to dream, to walk in my own way, free with an eye to see things as they are, a voice that means manhood, unquote. That's from Brian Hooker's translation of Rostand's Cyrano de Bergerac. I will never call one of these people by his preferred pronoun, if his preferred pronoun suggests he is something that I believe he isn't. Radical leftists are pushing the idea that not calling someone what he wants to be called is tantamount to violence, and that it's hate speech, and that hate speech is not free speech. They want to control your thoughts, to force language, and therefore concepts, to be used and formed a certain way. They want to force your mind to have a certain content that isn't justified by reality. They are intentionally destroying your ability to accurately conceptualize the world. They are purposely destroying your ability to think, to categorize accurately, and therefore to generalize, and therefore to act successfully in reality. They are demanding that you throw files into random folders in your subconscious, because certain people want to be included in certain folders, and you're violating their rights by not filing them that way. You know how destructive it is to have no organization and files thrown everywhere at random on your computer. That's what they demand you do in your own mind, so that they don't have to face the fact of belonging in a certain folder. The choice is either an accurate filing system or their ability to place themselves by whim in whatever folder they want, in your mind. I'm not giving up the accuracy of my filing system. They want to outlaw clear thinking, And they have in Canada with the so-called Human Rights Commission, an entity dedicated to violating human rights. They want to take the blindfold off of justice. The blindfold represents blindness to irrelevant characteristics. It therefore represents objectivity. Your actions are treated the same whether you're rich or poor, politically connected or a loner, mainstream or ostracized. It's the same principle as being colorblind. It's John Adams' principle of a nation of laws, not of men. It's the principle expressed in Euripides' Medea. Quote, "A good Greek land hath been thy lasting home, not Barbary. Thou hast seen our ordered life, and justice, and the long, still grasp of law, not changing with the strong man's pleasure." Unquote. That's the change Obama was hoping for. He and the rest want the law to change with the strong man's pleasure. They are brutes. You can see that from their violent, physicalistic protests, from the female professors who call for muscle and for men to beat up other men on their behalf, from the professors who hit people in the head with bike locks and then run away, from the cheering of the torture and murder of white North Korean prisoners. Justice Sotomayor of our current Supreme Court has explicitly attacked objective law and endorsed racism. Quote, "Whether born from experience or inherent physiological or cultural differences, our gender and national origins may and will make a difference in our judging." Unquote. Diversity in judges, quote, "will have an effect on the development of the law and on judging," unquote. And, quote, "there is no objective stance, but only a series of perspectives," unquote. And, quote, "personal experiences affect the facts that judges choose to see," unquote. A person's race is relevant to his judgment. Do you know what makes a North Korea, a Soviet Union? It's not overbearing law. It's whimsical law. It's law you can't predict. Men can bear the most extreme oppression if they can but predict how to avoid punishment. But in unpredictable chaos, punishment without purpose, that breaks men. And that is the goal of the social justice movement and evil, racist cretins like Sotomayor. Force without objectivity. Unpredictable force. Judgments in which your superficial characteristics may be brought to bear in unpredictable ways, because the random, superficial attributes of your judges will affect what they choose to see. You should jealously guard the freedom to believe the most hateful and even stupid things without fear of forceful reprisal. We have Supreme Court justices who don't believe in objectivity. The law is whatever they want it to be. Do not put up with that. Be enraged. Hate the people who push and enact that anti-freedom mentality. You should feel 100% confident that your race or unpopular ideas will play absolutely no part if you are accused of murder. You should feel as if you can express your ideas without the slightest concern that you'll be punished by the government for them. This is why the concept of hate crime is so evil. It doesn't matter that you have to commit a crime for them to come to bear. To the extent that the punishment is increased based on your ideas are being punished. It would be absurd and evil if you were given a mandatory extra 10 years in prison if you were caught stealing while opposing gay marriage. The fact that the punishment occurs only if you committed an actual crime is meaningless. They are still preventing and punishing ideas and discouraging people from holding them on grounds other than rational argument and persuasion and facts. Objective law is the only thing that stands between you and slavery. Hate the people who attack it. Speak out against them in moral terms. Identify what they are doing as destroying freedom and aiding the enslavement of mankind and the destruction of human life and happiness. Do not call these people regressive leftists, Maajid Nawaz's useless term. It's an accurate label, but too broad to be valuable. The whole left is regressive. Non-racial collectivism is not progressive. It's all regressive. The whole left wants to take us backward to statism, which was the standard model throughout history. Do you think that what led to the American and industrial revolutions and the concomitant explosions of freedom and technology was the discovery of centralized government control? You know, there's a reason why conservative and liberal mean the reverse in America compared to the rest of the world. In the rest of the world, conserving means conserving the statist, tribal past, and being liberal means progressing away from that toward freedom. In the US, we actually achieved freedom. That's what the country was founded on. So in the US, conserving means conserving freedom, because that's our past, whereas it's everyone else's not yet achieved future. And liberal here means progressing away from that freedom toward tribalism, slavery, and statism. So regressive doesn't differentiate the new left in any way. To differentiate, call them the racist left. That's what they are. That's the non-euphemistic way of identifying them. And that's what differentiates them from the more abstract, economically collectivist left. Do not act like you're pulling a cute twist like they do when they accuse you of getting triggered. You are straightforwardly applying the term racist. No twist, not reverse racism. Do not say it with the tenor of a gotcha. It's accurate and dispassionate. So is terrorist in relation to prominent leftist groups like Antifa. They are non-state actors using violence to achieve political ends. The idea that people on the so-called right are the ones you need to worry about is absurd. If I got a Bernie Sanders bumper sticker on my car, I'd feel fine. If I got a Trump sticker, I'd expect my car to be keyed within the week. Anyway, social justice and the naked, brutish nihilism we're seeing are the final results of the rejection of objectivity. People wonder how Hitler could turn the land of poets and philosophers into a slaughterhouse. This is how. By rejecting reason. By calling reason, quote, the whore of the Enlightenment, unquote, as Hitler did. There is an objective, external world, and conforming to it through reason is the only way to achieve freedom and peace. If you hold a grudge against reality for its intransigence, you will be miserable and a failure. Reject subjectivism as evil. Embrace reality. Live in harmony with it, and achieve that exalted state known as happiness, reserved exclusively for those who love existence and remaining in it, physically and mentally. Alright, this is the inaugural Q&A section. I have 2 questions today. Feel free to send in your own for future episodes. 1. I'm paraphrasing. I hear all the time that 100 million people died under communism. Why is communism blamed for the deaths that occur under it, but capitalism isn't blamed for the deaths that occur under it? End of question. Death is inevitable in any system. The question is, which system best facilitates life? Which system allows you to act on the basis of reality, and therefore prolong your life as much as possible? The answer is capitalism. It's analogous to asking, how can you blame a poor architect when his building collapses, but not blame a great architect when his does? The answer is obvious. All buildings will decay and fall down at some point, but the cause of the falling in the first case is that the architect did a poor job. The cause in the second case was simply that the nature of modern building materials is such that buildings can't last forever. In other words, the cause was reality. You can't equate two people or two systems of government because neither managed to do the impossible. Reality is an absolute. The question is whether reality is regarded as the limit or someone's authority is. You can't go beyond reality, but you can stop someone from living up to what's possible in reality. And that's what socialists do, and that's why they're rightly blamed for those deaths, because they caused them. 2. Is this art? End of question. And he's referring to a stamp with an artist's rendering of Ayn Rand. The drawing is, the stamp isn't. It's like a video game. The story in a game may be art, but the game itself as a whole is not. This is what I think of as the Greek vase issue. You know those Greek vases with pictures of chariots and other things on the side? The pictures are art, but the vase as a whole isn't. There is art on the vase. In an artwork, every element is subordinated to the theme. Utilitarian objects can't be art because there are constraints on their construction that have to do with practicality, not the expression of an abstraction. The compromise is made due to the practical purpose of the object cut against the purpose of the artwork, so the thing as a whole can't be art. To be clear, this is an important issue. It's not subjective, arbitrary, pointless, pedantic, or semantic. We're dealing with conceptual identification here. Does X fit into Y category? Figuring out if something is art is not a matter of semantics. It is exactly the same as trying to figure out whether a tree is a lawnmower. You're identifying whether things fit together on the basis of objective similarities. If you label a tree as a lawnmower, I don't know what you'll end up doing, but you won't be cutting grass. Art is the same way. It is a certain kind of thing, and it therefore has certain effects, and it's important to know whether a specific thing you're looking at is that kind of thing, and therefore will have those effects. That's it for today's episode. If you have any questions, you can send me an email at charles.a.2@gmail.com. You can also visit my website at charlestew.com. There you can find information on everything I do, including ways to support it. There are all kinds of rewards for doing so, including one-on-one tutoring if you support me at a certain level on Patreon. I also have a YouTube channel on which I throw up episodes of my podcast with a few still images. There are unique advantages to watching the podcast as opposed to listening to it. It's more intimate, so I like to give people options. In any case, thanks for listening. Let's meet again in episode 12.